During the early laps of the opening race of the 1995 Australian Super Touring Championship at Phillip Island, a racing accident took the life of Gregg Hansford. The Queenslander came to prominence on two wheels in Australia in the mid-70s riding for Team Kawasaki Australia, and by the end of the 70s he was in Europe, winning Grand Prix across the 250cc and 350cc classes. He claimed second in the 78 and 79 250cc World Championship and third in the 78 and 79 350cc World Championships before injury curtailed his two-wheeled career in the early 80s. He made a swift switch to four wheels, with which he dabbled in the late 70s, and scored his first major touring car win in the 1984 Oran Park 250 co-driving with Alan Moffat in the Peter Stuyvesant Mazda. He won the 1988 Sandown 500 alongside Moffat again in a Ford Sierra, but his crowning glory on four wheels came in 1993 when he co-drove with Larry Perkins to win the Bathurst 1000. It didn't feel right to include Phillip Island in our 1995 Australian Super Touring Championship, so I've opted to leave that track out. There was, though, in 1995 a non-championship Super Touring event which took place in between rounds 1 and 2. The non-championship event was a pair of support races for the 1995 Gold Coast Indycar race, and we'll be using that event as the opening round of our series. There were some cars which competed at this Gold Coast event which didn't run at the opening round at Phillip Island, and vice versa, some cars that ran at the opening round at Phillip Island and didn't race on the Gold Coast. So I've merged the grids, which has given us quite a large number of starters for the opening round of our series. We race in honour of Gregg Hansford. After a building year in 1994 under the Australian manufacturer's tag, 2-litre racing in Australia was ready to hit the big time in 1995, now running as the Australian Super Touring Championship. BMW were back to defend their crown. Reigning champion Tony Longhurst was out. In, Aussie international Jeff Brabham, fresh from a career in America, back to partner Paul Morris in a pair of Diet Coke BMWs, with a third BMW New Zealand entry of Charlie O'Brien ready to fight at the front as well. The big news of the off-season was Audi joining the championship with Brad Jones Racing. Brad Jones took delivery of the first of the Audi 80 Quattros at the end of last year, giving it a shakedown at Calder before a summer of testing at Winton, alongside new teammate for 1995, the young New Zealander Greg Murphy. Volvo returns to Australian motorsport in a factory presence for the first time since 1986, with Tony Scott signed to drive the fan favourite, the Volvo 850 estate. Hyundai are in the series as well, with a pair of factory entries run by lead driver Steve Hardman's team. While in the Privateer Stakes, Gary Rogers Motorsport has imported the car of 1994, the British Touring Car Championship winning Alfa Romeo 155 for young gun Stephen Richards to challenge for the title. The championship starts on the streets of the Gold Coast supporting the Gold Coast Indycar Grand Prix before winding our way around Australia, from Oran Park in Sydney to Tasmania and Symmons Plains, Calder under lights in Victoria, then Malala, Lakeside, Winton, before rounding out the season at Eastern Creek. A 16-race series to decide the 1995 Australian Super Touring Championship. The sun begins to set over Surfers Paradise as we prepare for race 1 of the 1995 Australian Super Touring Championship, taking place just after qualifying for the 1995 Gold Coast Indycar Grand Prix. We'll get straight down to the grid and run through the starting order for this opening race of the series. On pole position, a real surprise, Stephen Richards having his first 2-litre race in Australia, car number 74, the Alfa Romeo 155. It probably shouldn't be a surprise in some ways, given the fact this is the car that dominated the 1994 British Touring Car Championship. Alongside him on row number 1, Greg Murphy, the young New Zealander, driving the Oryx Audi 80 Quattro, 4-wheel drive. A lot expected of Murphy in his second season of 2-litre racing. Position number 3, Paul Morris, second in last year's Australian Manufacturers Championship, the favourite for the 1995 title, car number 23, the Diet Coke BMW. Position 4, the leader of the Brad Jones Racing Audi team, Brad Jones himself, car number 34, his first 2-litre race. Of course, he's a 5-time Australian Auscar champion and was the 94-95 Australian NASCAR champion. Position 5, Jeff Brabham, returning to Australia after many years overseas, where he'd won a Can-Am title, he'd been a front runner in Indy cars, of course dominated IMSA GTP racing in the late 80s and the early 90s, back in Australia starting from the 5th position. And alongside him on row 3, Tony Scott in the Volvo 850 estate, car number 11, Volvo returning to Australian motorsport for the first time in many years. From 7, that's us, Russ Dougman, car number 81, the Hyundai Elantra. It's a new model to 2-litre racing, debuted at the end of 1994. We're running the second car to Steve Hardman. I was surprised to qualify in 7th, so hopefully we can stay somewhere near the front in the races. Alongside me on row number 4, Steve Ellery in the Chelgrave BMW, switching from the Sierra into the BMW for 1995. This car was the car that won the 94 series for Tony Longhurst. Position 9, the BMW New Zealand entry, car number 45, Charlie O'Brien, joined on row 5 by Graham Moore in an ex-Jeff Allen Opel Vectra. Of course, it's called a Vauxhall Cavalier in the British Touring Car Championship, where Allen drove it. Down here we're calling it the Opel Vectra, run by Sentinel Motorsport. Position 11, Phil Ward's back in the Mercedes 190E. Nokia colours this year, car number 5. A little bit down the grid compared to where he was last year, but he'll be expected to come forward in the races. Position number 12, Jeff Allen, out from England to drive the Ross Palmer Motorsport Ford Mondeo, car number 77. Position 13, Hyundai team leader Steve Hardman, car number 80, the Hyundai Elantra. Alongside him, position number 14, car 97, Mark Seymour in the BMW M3. From 15, Peugeot 405, David Gross, joined on row number 8 by Melinda Price in the Inspired Racing Toyota Corolla, car number 26. From 17, Paul Pickett in a 2-door BMW, car number 58. Position 18, Peter Hills, back for the 95 series, back in the Ford Sierra, car number 98. From 19, Justin Matthews in a BMW M3, car number 13. From 20, Paul Nelson, another BMW M3 in Faber-Castell colours. Position 21, Bob Tweedy, an ex-Peter Jackson Ford Sierra of Glen Seaton's, car number 79. Position 22, veteran Bob Holden in a BMW M3, car number 16. He's changed from his Toyota Corollas, which he'd driven for so many years. And at the tail of the field, position 23, Mark Adderton in the Phoenix Motorsport Peugeot, car number 96. A short 8-lapper to open the season. This Gold Coast event runs to a different format compared to the rest of the series, where there's just the one qualifying session with the race 2 grid formed from the race 1 finishing order, whereas for the rest of the series there's separate qualifying sessions for each race. But as the sun sets, we're getting into the car and we're ready to go. Lights are on. And we're away for the 1995 Australian Super Touring Championship. Tony Scott just to our left. Down to turn 1. The brakes nice and early. Steve Ellery. Charlie O'Brien there in the Cellnet BMW. Just up to the second chicane. Take it easy, we've got Graham Moore just behind us as we drive down towards the A&A Hotel. Back to second gear as the sun sets. Around Surface Paradise. On the back straight. Up behind Graham Moore in the ex-Jeff Allen Vauxhall Cavalier in the British Touring Car Championship. Jeff Allen, of course, in this race in a Ford Mondeo. Up to the back chicane. Now the run up to the beach double chicane, which is very high speed, very blind. Oh, and there's a car on fire. It's one of the Oryx Audis. What happened there? Into the sun as we work our way around the hotels, the top end of the circuit. Quite an action-packed first lap. We've got Charlie O'Brien in the BMW New Zealand entry ahead of us. Onto the front straight. Some exciting first lap in our Hyundai. Down the Gold Coast Highway, past the pits. Top gear. 7th place, so we're where we qualified. Back to 3rd gear. The AI really straight lines these chicanes. Oof. Bit sideways through there. We've got a big gap to 8th place. Back to 2nd gear. Front of the A&A Hotel. Up onto the Esplanade now. Looks like Graham Moore behind us, who we made a bit of time on in that crash. Tried not to overtake anyone, but it was... the track was basically blocked by the Audi, whether it was Brad Jones or Greg Murphy. Not sure. A bit more competitive than I was a bit worried we were going to be. Through the chicane, which I don't feel too comfortable straight lining it as much, but the AI does it. Back to 2nd gear. This is sort of the rhythm section. And lap 2, the races are going to be over quite quick, of course. Just a support race to the Gold Coast Indycar Grand Prix, the opening round of the 1995 PPG Indycar World Series. Chicane, chasing O'Brien through the 2nd chicane. O'Brien in the BMW that Craig Baird drove in New Zealand at the end of 1994 in the Asia Pacific Championship rounds on Wellington. or as we did in Canberra in our series. Sixth gear. Through the Bartercard chicane. Bartercard in the early 2000s was the sponsor of the Miss Indy pageant, which was very popular for obvious reasons. So we flick it through the chicane. A bit late on the brakes there, but managed to get it around. Back to second. Back onto the front straight. 3 laps down. 5 to go. Once we get to round 2 onwards, the races will be a bit longer. It's a shame they couldn't mimic in this version of the track the chicanes, in as much as the big curbs that went with them in 1995 in the support races. The Super Tourers basically couldn't touch the curbs. Onto the Esplanade. Can we get Charlie? Under the network video bridge. '95 and '96 were the only years the Super Tourers supported the Gold Coast event. And indeed in '96 they were the main. '95, sorry, they were the main support act for the Indycars. Made a bit of time on O'Brien this lap. Round onto the Gold Coast Highway. Half distance. 4 down, 4 to go. Back to third gear. Through the Lexmark chicane. Through the Cars Guide chicane. Back onto the Gold Coast Highway as we run down to the A&A Hotel. Tony Scott in the Volvo is the next one ahead of O'Brien. Draft of the BMW. '95 was the first year they sort of put this double chicane. It's sort of been modified just about every year since the inaugural '91 event. We're right in with a shot of Charlie O'Brien here. Round onto the front straight. Try and get up the inside of car 45. No luck, but this is promising for the season ahead. In terms of running the Hyundai. Because Hyundai in 2025 are leading players in world motorsport, but in 1995 they'd just gotten involved in rallying with Australian Wayne Bell, the late Wayne Bell. Unfortunately, he passed away recently. And they got involved with Steve Hardman's team in the Australian Super Touring Championship. So we're mauling the back now of O'Brien's BMW New Zealand entry. Through the chicane. Tony Scott still must have come within a cigarette paper of the wall there. O'Brien still got some damage on the rear bumper from lap 1. Behind onto the front straight. Bit better drive from the BMW. Two laps to go in the opening round. 95 season. Finishing positions from this race are where we start race 2 on Sunday morning. This is the only round that's a slightly different format to the rest of the season, because the rest of the year every race has its own qualifying session, just like in the British Touring Car Championship. Got 8 seconds on 8th place. To the chicane, coming in blind, right on O'Brien's tail. Good to see the Volvo up there as well. Can we get a run on O'Brien? Bit of a nudge. Up on the curb. Up alongside. Come around to start the final lap. Short but sweet opening round. Only just getting into the rhythm. Up to turn 2. Down towards the A&A Hotel again. Made a mountain of time on O'Brien. Woof. Shouldn't have done that. Easy thing to do on a street track though. Sixth gear for the Bartercard chicane. Looks like everyone's in a fairly steady line. Looks like there's a few cars, which I presume are the leaders, up ahead of Tony Scott. Through the chicane for the final time. Down now to Falcon tyres turn under the Coke Bridge. Get up the inside of O'Brien. He's going to lock the corner. Get up the inside as we come onto the straight. It'll be a drag race home. I don't think the power of the Hyundai is enough. And we're going to finish 7th for the opening race of the season. Quite entertaining. That first lap accident, I think, for the Audi really spread the field out a bit. But not a bad way to get the front wheel drive cobwebs out. And let's see how everyone finished in the opening race of the season. Race 1 here on Gold Coast Indy weekend. An exciting opening race to the series, over in just 15 minutes, with victory going to Stephen Richards from pole position in the GRM Alpha. 7.8 seconds clear of Greg Murphy in the Audi. Jeff Brabham third in the Diet Coke BMW, just ahead of teammate Paul Morris, while Tony Scott rounded out the top 5 in the new Volvo, just ahead of Charlie O'Brien in the BMW New Zealand car. We finished 7th, right on Charlie O'Brien's tail, ahead of Graham Moore, Phil Ward in the Mercedes, while Steve Ellery rounded out the points finishes in the top 10. Mark Seymour was 11th in the BMW M3, just ahead of our teammate Steve Hardman in position number 12 in the Hyundai. Points for the top 10 in each race, so Stephen Richards has the lead of the championship on 24 points, 6 clear of Greg Murphy, and then back to Steve Ellery in 10th place on 1 point. So that's race number 1 out of the way, another 15 to go in the series. Race 2 coming up very shortly from the Gold Coast, and I look forward to your company then. Bye for now.